I'm Julie Barkey with this session update. A road dedicated to a fallen officer is now official. Governor Mark Dayton today signed into law the Officer Tom Decker Memorial Highway. It's named after the Cold Spring, Minnesota officer who was killed in the line of duty. Now, while we wait for the Senate to reconvene, we'd like to air that bill signing news conference from earlier today.
So, per usual, we'll have a brief presentation here and then open to questions on this subject, and then after that, I'll take questions on anything else. But very honored to have here today the two chief authors of this legislation, Senator Fischbach and Representative Howe, and also Representative Schoen, okay, I'm sorry. And also the Mayor and City Administrator of Cold Springs, and the Mayor and City Administrator of Richmond, the Chief of Police from Cold Springs, Mr. Phil Jones, and the wife of Officer Decker, Alicia Decker, and Commissioner Doman. So, you know, this is one of those moments that are just the hardest part of my job, to be at services as I was with Officer Decker, and other events like this are important to commemorate. As Representative Howe said, it's important that we make sure we don't forget the sacrifices that have been made by Officer Decker, who lived for eternity as a true Minnesota and true American hero, and yet he paid a terrible price for that, and the price that his wife has had to pay as well is in some ways even more difficult and more challenging because it's ongoing. We wouldn't be safe in our homes if we didn't have law enforcement officers, men and women, who are every day and every night risking their lives to keep the rest of us safe. And tragically, with what's occurring in our society now, with it seems ever increasing levels of random wanton violence, it just makes their jobs even more challenging and more dangerous than ever before. And yet they're willing to step forward. And Chief, you said 21 years you served, and you know your officers and Officer Decker and others throughout the state deserve our enormous gratitude and appreciation. And I know that's something that you probably don't always receive, certainly not to the extent you should. But as I said, it's sad that Officer Decker couldn't. I hope he is looking down from above to appreciate this deserved recognition, and I thank Senator Fischbach and Representative Howe for their leadership and their compassion and humanity in advancing this legislation. And with that, Senator Fischbach.
And I would like to thank the governor for signing the bill today. And I'd like to thank the members of the Senate, the state Senate, and the state House for supporting this bill. When something like this happens, this kind of tragedy, it shakes our security, our sense of security, and our sense of safety. And it not only shakes our community, the communities of Cold Spring and Richmond in our area, it shakes the entire state when we lose a police officer. in the line of duty. And I think this is a small memorial that we can have, naming this portion of the highway after Officer Decker, to remind us all about his sacrifice and remind the future generations of his sacrifice. And so I want to thank you all for coming today to witness the signing. But like I said, thank the state Senate and the state House and the governor for signing this and making this a reality. Thank you very much.
Well, I truly want to thank the support I had from the legislature, both the House and the Senate. And I want to thank the mayors and the representatives of the cities of Richmond and Cold Spring that actually brought this to Senator Fischbach and I to carry it. And it was truly an honor to carry this piece of legislation. And I truly believe that people and relationships are what important. And I think putting this as a memorial on this highway, the 11-mile stretch of Highway 23 between Cold Spring and Richmond, I think will stand there as a tribute daily for folks to see, to remember that this is truly what's important is people in relationship and what tragedies can occur when that breaks down. So it was truly an honor to carry that piece of legislation, and I want to thank the governor for signing it and all the support of legislators like Representative Schoen that gave us the support to carry this bill and to get it passed through the House and the Senate. Thank you.
And now the Chief of Police, Phil Jones.
I would like to start by thanking the House and the Senate and the governor as well. It's a very proud day for me to be a Minnesotan. I've never seen more dedication and more teamwork done so quickly and so much attention given to this topic. On behalf of Tommy's wife and the entire Decker family, I sincerely appreciate your efforts and the efficiency and speed at which it was done. It may seem like a very small piece of legislation to you. It may seem like a small stretch of highway to you. It's only 11 miles. But Officer Tommy Decker drove that thousands of times. That's what he considered his beat. An officer takes pride in that. It's their territory. So, as small as it may seem in the grand scheme of things, it's very big to us. It's very big to the police department, to Alicia, Tommy's wife, the Decker family, and I also believe the communities of Cold Spring and Richmond. So, again, thank you, Mr. Governor, Representative Howe, Senator Fischbach, and Representative Schoen, who expedited this process. Thank you very much.
So any questions on this subject?
Question for the Chief and Mrs. Decker, if you would. Chief, you move over there. Use the microphone. Well, could she tell, Mrs. Decker, would you tell us what jacket you're wearing and what that means to you?
This is my husband's jacket, and I wear it because, in a sense, it brings me closer to him, and I will wear it with pride for as long as I live.
What does it mean today for this?
It's part of him.
Any other questions?
Living,
Regarding this too, you mentioned police officers going in the face of danger. It seemed like you were alluding also to police officers in Boston, police officers all over the country. Is that what you meant?
Well, it's certainly applicable to law enforcement officers all over the country. I had Minnesota particularly in mind, and tragically this is not the only fallen officer during my 2+ years as governor. I consider them to be true patriots and eternal American heroes, as the brave men and women who serve and gave their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. And again, I think the rest of us are in their debt, and their families who have to carry on for as long as they're all around. But you know, the tragedies that are occurring are obviously affect all of us, even though they occur somewhere else. But the trend is ominous. Okay. Hey, I said, now I'm on target practice, so you need to stay and enjoy, or you can. Thank you.
Do you need some backup?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Getting rest of mail. All right.
Governor, there is a provision in the House tax bill where folks are referring this to you that would deal with a unnamed company, for biotech company in Brooklyn Park. What can you tell us about this company and what are you trying to offer them in terms of coming here?
Well, I think the incentives that are part of the bill speak for themselves in terms of foregone taxes and the MIF fund, the Minnesota Investment Fund, which some brilliant commissioner of deed thought of 30 years ago, and somehow has miraculously stayed in through Republican and Democratic administrations, and I'm glad to see it's still effective as an incentive for a company to come here. This is a very significant company. I'm not going to give their name because I've been told if we violate that confidence, it'll basically end the discussion and their consideration in Minnesota. So I'm not going to voluntarily provide that information, but it is a Fortune 500 company. It'd be a tremendous source of jobs for Minnesota now in the future. It's a very good company, and you know, we're hopeful that it will this effort will be successful, and that's about all.
Shouldn't the public know who this company is if they're going to be getting taxpayer money?
Well, if I tell you who it is, if I take the company at its word, there won't be a prospect to come to Minnesota anymore. So that's the trade-off. I mean, if you know, you can get into a requirement, you know, under law that I have to disclose it, or Commissioner Clark Sieben has to disclose it, certainly we'll disclose it, but I'm not going to volunteer it.
Why would you wait to be required by law to disclose it? As Tom said, it's taxpayer money. Because
the taxpayers will be spared the money, and we'll lose out on the company and the jobs for disclosing it. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me what the call should be, but I respect you have a different perspective, and that's.
Something else? On another note, the House Democrats put forward a tax bill yesterday that includes the alcohol tax. You said before you weren't supportive of that. Are you completely ruling it out?
I don't rule anything out. Finally, you know, everything is going to be negotiated in the Conference Committee, and the Senate will have its differences from my proposals as the House. That's their prerogatives. You know, I stand by the bill that I proposed, the tax bill, and focus on raising taxes fairly on upper income people, and then on with the cigarette tax, and not going into some of these other areas, gas tax, sales tax on clothing, and other things that I don't support. But again, we have to come to a three-way agreement. We always do in order to get a bill passed in the House and Senate and then signed. So you know that'll start in a couple weeks, and you know that'll involve give and take on everybody's part.
Governor, in
In a matter of moments, the Senate is going to take up the issue of pay raises for lawmakers and executives, including yourself. These are always tough issues, especially in a weak economy. What's your position on that?
Well, I understand for citizens, a governor making $120,000 a year, a commissioner making $108,000 a year. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. It's in the instance of the governor, more than double what the average family in Minnesota has an income. The reality is that, I'll leave governors out of it, but very talented and highly sought after people like our commissioners, agency heads, can get salaries 50 to 100% larger than that. Local governments across the state, the University of Minnesota, and we've had those experiences, and we have people now serving who took 50%, in one case about almost 100% salary reduction in order to serve. So fortunately that people are willing to make that commitment to us and show that dedication, but it's a competitive market as it is in the private sector, and we need to be accommodating to that. I don't seek an additional salary. It's my successor, who may not have my situation, certainly should be part of the mix, and I've agreed to go along with that. I'll donate, if it passes, any increase in salary I get for as long as I'm governor, to charity. The legislature, I believe, is terribly underpaid, and I think Minnesotans are getting a better legislature than they deserve, free of graft, free of any kind of economic wrongdoing, at salaries at $32,000 plus the per diems. I mean, I believe that it's be totally justified for a legislator to get the same salary as your average Minnesota family, which would be about $54,000 a year, and then eliminate some of the per diem substitute for salary kind of things that are forced on them. But I think the Minnesota legislature is $38 billion in state money and about close to $70 billion in federal and state money, and our citizens are extraordinarily well served. A part-time legislature is a long ago myth, and it can't be for that level of financial responsibility and all the policy considerations and all the constituent service. And I think we want to make it possible for good people, especially those with families, to serve in the legislature. They should be able to make what an average Minnesota family makes.
Governor, understanding that now is obviously a busy time, have you given any thought to the Health Insurance Exchange Board? Their applications closed last week.
The open appointments process just closed, I think, the end of last week, and there's a group now who are reviewing those applicants. I haven't seen the list, but they narrow it down to a pool that I will then interview personally. And I've met with the group, especially Commissioner Showalter, Commissioner Jessen, and some others, talk about, we want a diversity of people on the board, but people will each bring his or her own special expertise, and a small board, 7 people, including Commissioner Jessen, so it's going to have to, everyone's going to have a high level of expertise, although from a different perspective. And I believe in small boards. I think they're more accountable and more efficient, but this one's going to be, I expect, difficult just to narrow it down to 6 people when there are probably at least 6 more who will be equally well qualified. But we need a strong board. We need a very active board. We need a very talented board to make sure this is a success.
Governor, we're going to have another discussion on e-pulltabs this afternoon. The proposal being to allow e-pulltabs without paper. What do you think about that, and the way that this discussion is going generally?
Well, it's my understanding that the charities oppose that separation, and I don't want to reopen the whole stadium bill, and I think it's it would be the best outcome would be to work with, rather than against, any of the affected parties. The memorabilia tax, I was reminded by Michelle Kelm-Helgen at our meeting, was part of the original proposal to finance, and literally until the last week, and it was taken out because it was a tax provision, and the Republican majorities were opposed to any tax increase. So to me, it fits back into the original scheme, and we're calculating how much money it'll make. We continue to believe, based on the experience of those bars and others that are now providing the pull tab experience, and particularly when the link bingo gets online, that these are going to be very successful ventures. There are already bars that are reporting significant increase in sales and charities that are reporting significant increases in the amount of money they're receiving, and we just need to spread that word and make more and more people aware of, both in terms of the provider and the consumer. So it certainly is taking longer than we expected, and it'll continue to be probably more gradual than we would like, but we're going to do everything we possibly can to accelerate the timetable for the development of them, but again, recognizing that the sites that are operating now are meeting the projections in terms of per-site revenues.
So you believe that more memorabilia tax would be a reasonable backup, or even an alternative?
Well, I think it should be in addition to. I mean, I'd like to, get this settled, and we have people who consider buying the bonds are going to want absolute assurance that they're going to get repaid. So this is not about trying to parse, right to the fine line. It's about assured sufficiency so that we'll be able to meet those obligations.
Would you need anything more, do you think, besides memorabilia and a better promoted or more effective pull tab?
Well, that's a good question. That's what the Department of Revenue is now assessing. What the memorabilia has got a couple of different forms, different rates in the Senate and the House, different applicability. So they're crunching those numbers now, and then we'll have to work that in. But again, I want there to be sufficiency, assured sufficiency, so that we can make sure the bondholders are made whole and we can proceed with this project without political posturing or other interruptions.
Have you talked to anyone from the Vikings organization about the memorabilia tax?
I have not, but Michelle Calhoun has, and they're aware of the realities of the situation. I don't think any of the teams are probably thrilled with this notion, but at least the Vikings recognize the imperative of having a reliable and sufficient funding source.
In answering the question about legislative pay, you mentioned your situation. What is your situation in terms of self-financing another run? You only raised $32,000 so far this year for your re-election campaign?
Well, I think I've used the analogy before. It's a little bit out of season, but it's like asking the Vikings for their playbook, a couple of days before the game. I mean, that's part of our strategy, and I can't raise money during the legislative session from most people, so I don't try. I had, I think, 2 events specifically for lobbyists and the like, and also, none of the PACs, law firms, and others can contribute. So it's a very, limited potential of people, and also, the $500, which I, said to the legislative leaders on both sides, I think, needs to be changed. And I told the Republican leaders that any of them or their members who are running for governor are going to find out very quickly. It's just, it's, if anything, doing better advantage of an incumbent than a challenger. So I'm hoping that there'll be broad bipartisan recognition of the need to raise that, and that'll make it, more feasible to even have events and ask people to come and contribute. I've sent out my first email asking for contributions, and I'm not sure that the response is quite equal to the $1 million that Paul Wellstone pulled in with one of his, but that wasn't his first one. So Paul one day on the Senate floor, he summed up to me, because we used to talk about who disliked fundraising the most, the more, and he came in and said, big smile, he said, "I want you to know I raised $1 million this last week." I said, "Oh, did you sign a direct mail letter?" And he turned to look at me and just went right off. So take a while to get to that point.
Governor, the situation in Boston, I understand it's not gun related, but should there be any implications in terms of the debate over gun regulations here in Minnesota, or other security measures as far as you see it?
Well, I think indirectly in that it just underscores the escalating level of violence that's being practiced in our society. And, you can't go to an event like that, a civic event, and, and take your children and not have to, worry for your life or your limbs, and the cowardice that's involved and just the shamelessness of just destroying the lives of innocent people is something I can't comprehend. But I see it happening increasing frequency and with increasing, magnitude of destruction capabilities. These, as you said, were not firearms. They were, I guess, pressure cookers loaded with the kind of, basically the kind of thing that suicide bombers use in the Middle East. So, if there were a way to put a stop to it, I mean, obviously we would do so. But I think the background check legislation they're considering here in Minnesota has broad public support. Surveys have shown that even that if you ask about banning certain weapons, public is, at least in the majority, not supportive. But then you ask the next breath the question, do you support universal background checks? And it's overwhelmingly in favor of that. So quite a number of the same people that disagree with the first are supportive of the second. So to me, it's politically advantageous to legislators who support it, and it's by matter of policy and just trying to save lives. And people say, well, it's not going to, be perfect, and people who are going to commit crimes with guns are going to find some way of getting guns. To me, laws are also about stating our values as a society. We set a law, and we'll say we're going to do our utmost to enforce this law now, and we're going to keep working on technology and other strategies to become more effective and more effective. But we're not going to just be indifferent and say, well, because we can't stop everything, we're not going to even try. We're not going to even bother. And this is vitally important. This is life and death for innocent Minnesota citizens, for law enforcement officers like Officer Decker, and just for the, I guess say the basic kind of cohesion of our society, which is seriously damaged every time one of these just senseless, murders of vast numbers of people is perpetrated. And, we owe it to ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, to do everything we possibly can to prevent that from happening.
You were watching a news conference from earlier today with the governor signing into law the Officer Tom Decker Memorial Highway. It's named after the Cold Spring, Minnesota officer who was killed in the line of duty. You also heard the governor commenting on the finance bills moving through the legislature and the process of appointing a board that will oversee the health insurance exchange. E-pulltabs came up as well, and the governor contends video pull tabs and bingo remain viable funding options for the Vikings stadium.